Hi, everybody. Welcome to the QB School. I am JT O'Sullivan. Today we are talking play caller personality. Let's get it going. Welcome to the QB School. The question for today's video comes from Jack Murphy. Hey JT, I could probably write a lot about what your videos have brought to my experience watching the game, but that would be too many words for you. I would be curious to hear the ways, if any, in which you thought that the personality of a play caller was reflected in their actual play calling. I know everyone in the league is hyper competitive, but did you ever see an emotional connection between the play caller and the types of plays they preferred, or the order in which plays could be called? I know you've said in a couple of videos that Coach Martz was a kind of bigger personality and have hinted at ways in which that would be reflected in his decision making. But as to what extent that is me misremembering what you've said or a fantasy projected by me, I am unsure. Jack, I appreciate the emailed question. You get the opportunity to kind of go back and forth with me on email when you sign up either for the QB School Tool, the Pass Protection Quiz, the free quick game course, a bunch of different ways to do that. It's a fun way to interact, get some opportunities to have some suggestions for the channel. I certainly appreciate this question. As far as the play caller personality, there's a lot there. For me, I absolutely thought that the play caller's personality came out in the play calling. And what I mean by that is I don't necessarily think of it as a totally positive thing or totally negative thing. It kind of sways back and forth within the tension of what that kind of feels like and looks like, and really what I think you would want if you were a head coach. The other thing I think that's interesting to think about when you unpack the play caller personality is really, I think the most often anecdotal phrase that's tethered to kind of the personality of the team is the team will be the reflection of the head coach. And I think that that's more or less true pretty often. What I mean by that is if you're around a defensive-minded head coach, usually that's going to put some artificial kind of boundaries on an offensive play caller. And now we're just talking offensive play calling here. But if you're the head coach and you're also the offensive play caller, you probably get a little bit more freedom because you're not necessarily answering to anyone about timeouts or fourth down kind of ideas, when to go for it, when not to, when to be aggressive, when to be conservative, those types of things. You've usually already figured out over the course of kind of that pre-management of how you're going to attack a game, what your approach, what your philosophy is going to be in those types of situations. So for me, it really falls into kind of a few different buckets. So what's the role, what's the philosophy of the team? What's the head coach's mentality? Do they come from a defensive mindset? If they do, it doesn't matter how big the personality is. There's going to be some artificial boundaries. And so you brought up the Coach Mike Martz. When I was around Coach Martz for 2 years, both times around defensive head coaches, I think he certainly was what I would consider a bigger personality, and not necessarily in a negative term. He had just been there, done that. He'd been the offensive coordinator for the greatest show on turf. He'd been the head coach at a Super Bowl. And so he brought that kind of experience, that kind of energy into a room. And so he certainly was a large personality. And I thought it was reflected in his play calling, his aggressiveness, his experience, but also being able to kind of motivate people to be able to go out there and believe that this is the stuff that got us to a Super Bowl. The idea being that we can do the same types of things if we believe and kind of all get on the same sight line. And so just being that type of personality kind of overflowing into the design, the kind of offensive architecture, absolutely plays a big part in what that looks like as far as personality and play caller together. I've also been around a bunch of offensive play callers that I would say have been constrained because of their head coach. And maybe not just the head coach, that's probably an oversimplification, but the either organization, program, team situation, maybe their personnel, maybe their philosophical approach from the head coach. We're going to win on defense. We're going to win on special teams. Any different version of that same kind of menu of we're not going to be as aggressive as maybe the offensive play caller would like. And so I really think it is dependent kind of top down to give that offensive play caller the freedom to be able to be as aggressive as they want. But I also think that it comes top down, usually from the head coach, owner, to be able to kind of empower their coaches to show their personality, to have their personality come out in how they install, how they teach, how they interact, what their relationships are like. And then that trickles in to the play calling. I think the play calling is the final output. I'm always much more concerned about the process, how we get to that final output in a game, in a championship moment. Those types of things to me are a little bit more personality centric. The kind of, hey, we have a lot of trick plays because I'm a trickster. Like, not really. I think it's more about, hey, we want to be aggressive. That's our mindset. That's the way we attack everything we do in a program, in a team, in an organization. Or, hey, we want to be really sound. We want to have answers. We want to provide a full, robust toolkit. Well, that's what we do everywhere. Nutrition, preparation, walkthroughs, practice habits, recovery, all those types of things, they overlap. And so the personality of the play caller, as far as the outputs of what's called on Sundays or Saturdays or Friday nights, I think is a one small piece that maybe is the most visible piece for a lot of fans or people looking from the outside in. But when you're part of the team, part of the program, you really get to, I think you want to encourage those personalities to be themselves, to really take ownership of their role and make it the best version that they possibly can. And so that always, to me, comes from the top down and bottom up. And so I think players can smell it when you're not authentic, when you're trying to fake the funk, so to speak, and try to fake it till you make it. Those types of things don't really jam so much today, and I don't think ever really jammed. I think it's the idea of being able to be yourself. If you have an aggressive mindset, if you want that to come out in your play calling, I think it can and it will if you're allowed to flourish. Now, again, there are always artificial constraints depending on your situation. But for instance, anecdotally, use myself coaching a high school team as the head coach and the play caller. I certainly have to answer to our players, fans, administration, for any sort of like craziness decision-making wise. But we set the kind of philosophical approach pretty early, and it's pretty well understood exactly what we're trying to do. And so the kind of expectations are already set. And so for me, I think it is important, not just for myself, but for all the coaches within the program to really have their personalities come out, whether it be their calling plays, whether it be in their personnel groups, whether it be in the position coaching, the offensive, defensive side of the ball, special teams. I think it makes coaches better when they feel empowered to insert their personality, make it their own, and really encourage that from their players, to not be put in a box, to not have, so many rules that they feel constrained so that they can't be themselves. I think it really works both ways. And so, yes, this question was about offensive play calling personality, but I would really push it back to say how you think about it. That's one output of really a program organization approach to either empower people to buy into the team and have a little flash, have a little kind of swag to bring your own personal kind of identity to that group, so that it's not just the team. It can be both. It can be and both. Bring your personality, the way you approach it, to make it special for you and for the team. That's why it's not just a collection of clones. It's a collection of personalities, all making the decision of what's important, that collective good to be able to move forward together. But as far as offensive output, yeah, let's have our offense coordinator be able to showcase their personality. And it doesn't have to be that we're going to throw Hail Marys every play. But if we want to be aggressive, a specific game, a specific series, a specific situation, a specific personnel group, I think it's important to be able to kind of unpack those things, but not have it be, totally out of whack. If we're a, old school kind of 1 foot split single wing team, well then, we're probably not going to come out in quads because I went to a clinic and got really jacked up and want to be aggressive this year. I think it's important to kind of blend those things together, to be consistent, to be who you really are, to give your team a chance to win. But yeah, who wants to put coaches in a box and say, hey, don't bring your personality to the field, don't bring your personality to the meeting room, to the walkthrough, to the practice, to the game sideline, those types of things. I think you're unnecessarily hamstringing yourself. So I think the best coaches empower those kind of play callers, coordinators, even position coaches, and then trickles down to players to really showcase their personality. And let's be going in the same direction. And let's all be on the same bus. Those types of things. So hopefully that makes sense. A roundabout way to say it. I will say that for me personally, anecdotally, it almost always in the league was tethered to who the head coach was. If the head coach was a defensive-minded coach, usually the offensive coordinator, in my opinion, was kind of felt like he was boxed in a little bit to be able to play it exactly how that head coach wanted to play it, and it was usually a little bit more conservative than I would probably say they would want to. Now, that's a huge generalization, but that was just my take across the league and my experience across a third of the league. So again, take it for what it's worth. I sincerely appreciate the question. Love the interaction. Let me know if you think I'm totally off my rocker, what you think, what you disagree with, what you agree with. I appreciate it. Keep the questions coming, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.